I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to Korean Cultural Society of Boston's sixth annual Korean Heritage Symposium. My name is Gina Kwok, and I will be your moderator for this evening, and I'm also the vice president of the society. We want to thank the Overseas Koreans Agency and the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in Boston for their sponsorship and support as well. This is our fourth evening in a 4-week series where we have been gathering to learn more about Korean culture. And tonight, our topic is going to be on hats, demons, and identity. Koreans' black horsehair hat across time and imagination. And with us, we have Director Jinyoung Jin, who is the Director of Asian Art and Culture at Stony Brook University's Charles B. Wang Center. She curates exhibitions and public programs that explore Asian art, visual culture, and transnational histories. She is the author of Art, War, and Exile in Modern Korea, Rethinking the Life and Work of Lee Kwae-dae, which was published in 2025. And her recent projects include the Korean Art Alive film series and exhibitions that bridge traditional and contemporary practices. We're really excited that she has joined us tonight. And so now please join me as we welcome Director Jin. Thank you, Director Jin.
Thank you, Gina, for the wonderful introduction. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining me tonight, and it's really exciting to see many people here online. So let me share my screen. So before we begin, I'd like to especially thank Professor Kim Byung-guk and Lee Jae-hyuk 선생님 for inviting me. It's such an honor to be here to share fascinating stories of an insight that reveal why Korean hats are so unique and why they might be one of the most powerful symbol of Korean culture. Now, I have a feeling that some of you might be here because you're fans of the Saja boys from K-pop Demon Hunters, or maybe because you have binge watched The Kingdom on Netflix. But my talk may not have the rhythm of K-pop songs nor the sword fight of Kingdom, but I promise it has plenty of stories, stories about how something as simple as a hat can carry the weight of entire Korea's history and identity. So long before they start trending in Korean pop culture, I found myself drawn to Korean hats, to their elegance and their symbolism and the way each hat carries a story. So I created two exhibitions on Korean hats. One back in 2010 at the Korea Society in New York, and another one in 2019 at the Charles B. Wang Center, where I currently work. Here's some photos from 2019 show. I invited the audience to come wearing their favorite hats. So people really show up in style. There were baseball caps, army hats, party hats, and even one pink furry hat, enough to steal the show. And we also set up the photo booth where a visitor could try on different kinds of Korean hats. It was wonderful to see people laughing, posing, and certainly realizing how special these designs really were. So, why create an exhibition around hats? First, I realized that fashion has this immediate way of connecting people. But more importantly, I was looking for a subject that felt distinctly Korean. We've all visited many museums and seen exhibitions of Korean paintings or ceramics like this one. They are undeniably beautiful and refined. But let me ask you this. If you didn't read the label, could you always recognize them as distinctly Korean? Sometimes they look a little Chinese or a little Japanese. And that's not a criticism. It reflect the long history of culture exchange and shared visual languages across East Asia. But it also create a challenge. So Where do we find a visual form that immediately connects it a distinctly Korean identity? And as a curator, I started to think, what if the Korean hat could be, become that symbol? And I think that traditional Korean hats are incredibly powerful. They provide us a uniquely Korean way of seeing identity, hierarchy, and Korean value. Here's the installation view from my 2019 hat exhibition. There are nearly 100 different kind of traditional hats in Joseon, Korea. These hats never just accessories. They were a form of identity and carrying layers of meanings about class, gender, occupation, and even moral characters. So let's take a closer look at what makes a Korean hat so special and why they could become one of the Korea's defining cultural icon. First, early Western visitors were stunned by Korean hat culture. Back in 1885, American diplomat named Percival Lowell wrote a book called Joseon, the Land of Mourning Calm. And at the time, this title reflects how most Westerners perceive Korea. It was calm, mysterious, and distinct, maybe due to the language barrier, different cultures. And Korea seemed like a very serene, almost a hidden place to the outside of the world. And this person, Lowell, devoted one chapter to hats and called Korea a land of hats. Here's another book, Peeps at Many Lands, Korea. And this was published in 1910, and the cover immediately grabs our attention with this image of a man wearing horse hat. And this we have Elizabeth Key's Old Korea, The Land of Mourning Calm, published in 1946. And I found it interesting that she used the same title, The Land of Mourning Calm. It really shows how deeply that original perception of Korea, calm, mysterious, and distant, continued to many Western audience over time. By the way, the Keys was a truly remarkable artist and traveler. She was a young Scottish woman, and she traveled all the way from Scotland to Japan in 1915 and ended up staying in Japan for 9 years. And she explored many countries in East Asia, and she traveled to Korea for the first time in 1919, and she instantly fell in love. Most of all, she was captivated by the incredible variety of Korean hats, and from elegant horsehair hat to practical umbrella hat. And she described umbrella hat as a so stylish, so sensible, and practical design. And what's amazing is that she saw Korea very differently, unlike many of her time who were influenced by Japanese colonial gaze, often viewed Korea as a backward or barbaric. Keys truly admire its culture. So through her art, she captured its beauty and its distinct character. And there are more earlier, Western visitor who was fascinated by this Korean hat, especially this black top hat made of horsehair. It's called kat, and they had never seen anything like this. It was a light, doable, and translucent, almost magical. So this French traveler, Charles Ferret, wrote about it back in 1892. He said Korean hats is made of horsehair so that it lasts in the air and the sun. So he noticed how practical and poetic the design was at the same time. And you've all remembered the Saja Boys performance, Your Idol, right? And that scene is probably the most iconic moment in the whole film, but they come out in those black top hat, and then suddenly the hat becomes a star of the show. Even though it's an animation, you can almost feel the texture of the horsehair, that see-through quality. So how were these hats were made? And here are tools, wooden blocks for the shaping, irons and silk and bamboo thread and horsehair. And I like to share a short video. It captures the extraordinary level of details and craftsmanship involved. It's a little bit long, so I'll fast forward a little bit. So it actually has a sound, but somehow with the input and output, you cannot hear the sound, but they don't speak. It has a caption, both, I think it's in Korean. So I'm going to explain the step a little faster, but you're singing three artisans here. They all specialize in a different parts. So we're going to watch a little bit. So, so the first artisan, she's an artisan who's making the bamboo thread. So she's carefully splitting the bamboo into extremely thin strand. So it becomes like this thin thread. And then second artisan is tying the thread together, and then she's spreading them into a circular shape. So this will become the brim of the hat. And she's weaving the horizontal lines, which is made of even finer bamboo thread. The vertical is a little thicker. Gonna fast forward. So this becomes the brim of the hat. And then the third artisan, she's weaving the horsehair. Second major component, which is the crown of the hat. It's the same way of a weaving. So everything you're seeing here is incredibly time consuming to make a one hat. So I'm gonna keep fast forwarding a little bit. So this is the top part of the black top hat. And then this master artisan is bringing everything together. So the hat is the horsehair part is get boiled, and then he coated with the sumi ink mixed with the fishy glue, which gives the both strength and that deep black surface. And then he's preparing the bamboo thread again to create the top part of the hat. So he's adding this bamboo thread to reinforce the top of the hat. So it's a little shorter thread of the bamboo. Now, this time he's gluing an individual thread onto the wooden board. And then he's cutting in a circular shape and then applying the sumi ink again. And then this part will go onto the top of the horsehair crown. So he attached it on the top. And then after that, he's applying. Let me fast forward. You can watch the whole video in a regular speed on YouTube, but let me show you the final product. Um, let's see. And then using the bamboo thread, he's making the circular shape to reinforce the frame of the hat. And then surprisingly, there's another layer that, he's making a little bit of circular shape to form the brim part. And after that, his son actually is another artisan. He's applying very thin layer of silk thread on the top of the surface. And then he applies another sumi ink and it glues to make the black, translucent type of black hat. So now you might be wondering, does it really take all these steps to just to make it one hat? And the answer is yes. And this is the Joseon dynasty's obsession with detail. And what looks like an effortless from a distance is actually a result of a very complex and disciplined process. So let me end the video with the completion of the hat. So you can watch the whole video on YouTube. It's about 41 minutes or so, but I just fast forwarded. So, so this is a Kisan Kim Jung-gun's painting showing two makers at work, and we saw the same kind of tools in the video. And interestingly, if you look at this painting carefully, you will notice that these two artisans are not wearing hat themselves. This is a small detail, but it tells us that hats differ by class, space, and purpose, indoor, outdoor, and scholars and servant. So every Korean man, adult in Joseon's dynasty, wore this hat. But not all hats were equals. Hat had a hierarchy. The wider brim represent the higher the class. And look at this one. The wider brim, peacock feathers, jade ornament. This was for kings and high officials only, and the hat literally screamed power, status, and authority. And here you see Korean actor Park Bo-gum on a magazine cover wearing a wide brim hat and same symbol of authority now reimagined in a high fashion. And here are my favorite characters from K-pop Demon Hunters. My favorite characters are not actually the Saja boys. They are the tigers and magpie. And the magpie, he's even wearing a black top hat here. But you can judge him whether he's a commoner or the high officer by the size of the brim here. And here we have a king's crown made from silk and paper and the gold leaf. And as you can see, hats like this one was an indicator of the honor, class, and status. And here's another hat called a samo. And it was a tall but winged. The samo was worn by the government officer when they performed the formal duty at court. But here's the interesting part. In Korea, all men were allowed to wear this hat on their wedding day, regardless status. And this is not a royal wedding, but commoner's wedding. And it made a groom look special and almost elevated for their wedding day. And I think the Joseon society understood the power of that symbolism, allowing every man to experience that just once the dignity and prestige usually reserved for the upper class elite. And this is this tradition continued today, and this is a contemporary wedding photo. And these days, the Koreans wear Western suits and white dresses, just like the Western wedding. But many still include a traditional ceremony called pebak, blending the old and new beautifully. And this is a straw hat for a commoner and white hemp hats for funeral. And in Korea, color white symbolize the funerals and grief. This is outdoor hat. As you can see, it's a fur-lined hat for the winter. And even babies had their own hats, often embroidered with tigers to protect them from harm. And Korea didn't just have outdoor hats. There were also many types of indoor hats. And look at this scholar's top knots and called sangtu. And for Koreans in Joseon society, hair wasn't just hair, it was a part of the body inherited from one's parents. So indoor has had a simple but very important purpose to keep the top knot neat and tidy. In Confucius culture, it wasn't just about appearance. Taking good care of your hair was seen as a virtue, a way of showing respect to your parents and to yourself. And before marriage, boys had a long braided hair, and after marriage, they tied it up. Once again, social class was always indicated, even with indoor caps. The more tiered, the higher the status. So there were hats for literally every man, and you could buy hats everywhere in Joseon, Korea. And this fascinating photo was taken by Percival Lowell, who visited Korea in 1884. And if you look closely, you can even see hats resting on the top of the roof as well. And the bottom as well, and look at all these people, in different types of hats, and I think that is such a vivid glimpse to Korea's hat culture at the time. And this is another one, this time with a whole stack of hats balancing high, and another hat maker or the restorer on the street. Now you can see why so many Western visitors were completely captivated by Korean hats. Korean hats became a whole chapter in the travel accounts and even the subject of paintings. And many foreign visitors had already traveled through China and Japan, but when they arrived in Korea, they saw something quite different. If we compare China, Japan, Korea, I mean, both China and Japan certainly had a hats, but they weren't as diverse or as socially specific as in Korea. In China, social rank was expressed through their clothing, through robes and colors and rank badge. And in Japan, hats were more about traditions and ceremony, not precisely marker of social hierarchy. But in Korea, hats were structural. They told you who you are, your class, your status, your occupation. And I would argue that Korea developed a far more diverse and refined head culture than either in China or Japan. And as a whole, whole culture, built around the hat. So the foreign visitors wrote about hats, paint them, and could not stop praising their craftsmanship, variety, and symbolism. And and here comes the sad part. This vibrant and century-old hat culture disappeared almost overnight. And by late 1800, everything changed. In 1876, Korea opened its door to the world for the first time. And here is a Yoo Il-jun, one of the Korea's first envoy to the U.S. And in this photo, he's wearing a top knot when he visited the U.S. For the first time. However, in this next image, he appears in a Western suit with his hair cut short. He was a reformer who believed that modernization was a survivor. And influenced by a group of reformers, the Korean government issued a Haircut Act in 1895. And overnight, men were ordered to cut off their top knots, and which was a symbol of adulthood and dignity for centuries. And can you imagine the government force you to get a haircut, right? So many people resisted, and it was just not about hair. It was about identity, pride, and the sudden shock of change. And this scholar, Choi Kyun, famously said that if you must cut my hair, cut off my head first. It was that radical. And for many Koreans, hair was a vital link to their ancestors. And in fact, the Yoo Il-jun personally cut the hair of a crown princess Sunjong, which signaled the royal endorsement of modernization and state commitment to the reformist vision. And but here's the flip side. Some people actually welcome that change because the Haircut Act also brought a kind of freedom. For the first time, Koreans were no longer defined by the hats, those visual marker of class, wealth, and even occupation that had structured the society for centuries. And without a hat, everyone suddenly look a little more equal. And here you can see photos of a barbershop from the time in both Seoul and this one is from the Pyongyang. But then that didn't mean that hat culture vanished completely. And as people embraced their new short hair, Western style hat certainly became all the rage. Of course, they were not, I mean, they were very expensive and rare back then. It was a luxury, but still, everyone was curious to try them on. So look at these photos. You can see a man still dressed in a traditional Korean attire, but he was wearing Western shoes. And in another photo on the right, I think that it was the same man, but he's trying on a Western suit jacket over his traditional outer jacket. So I think it was such a perfect snapshot of that in between moment when old and new Korea met face to face. And this change also sparked creativity. And look at this hat. And I think that, this looks like a regular Western bowler hat. But the truth is, this is made of horsehair. And this particular hat currently on display at Peabody SS Museum, Salem, Massachusetts. I think that is about an hour away from Boston, right? So I do encourage all of you to visit the museum to see this hat in person. But if you visit the museum, just please look really closely to see hidden pattern on its surface. It's very subtle, almost invisible at first, but when the sunlight pass through, and maybe you have to put on your cell phone light, but it reveals its beauty. So there are delicate crane patterns on the top. It's just very sheer and then lightweight design. It gives a uniquely Korean aesthetics. And even though it was a Western style hat, the use of traditional Korean motifs shows how they blended culture influences with the local artistry. And you can see patterns of bats and cranes on the other traditional hats, adding layers of symbolism, meaning, symbolic meaning and elegance to their design. So in Korean culture, cranes for longevity, and bats for the fortune. And even while, modernizing Korean found a ways to weave in symbolism. And now you might be wondering whose hat is that? This hat was actually a gift given to Percival Lowell, who wrote that book and during his time in Korea. And he was also served as a translator to the first Korean delegation to the US. And in his 1885 publication, he even devoted an entire chapter to the Korean hat culture, and he mentioned this particular hybrid hat. And here's a fun part. Lowell had a Korean friend who once asked to borrow his Western hat, and sometimes later, around the New Year, that friend showed up with a surprise, and Lowell wrote about the receiving this enormous mountain-like hat box as a gift. And when he opened it, inside it was this incredible hybrid hat blending Western shape with a Korean craftsmanship. And he was absolutely delighted, and you can almost imagine his surprise. And here's the fascinating part. I found a very similar hybrid hat and that hat box together in the museum in Berlin. And another one in the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. And so clearly this style was in trend after that, Korean were experimenting, adapting, and reinterpreting the fashion in their own creative ways. And I think it's such a great example of how East and West met, and not through the conflict, but through the fashion and creativity. And what makes it even more fascinating is that it is not just story in a book, but real tangible piece of the history, one that literally connect the lawyer's story to an actual surviving artifact. So with all this discovery, I made a video called "Hats Make the Korean Man." It's just a 1 minute teaser, so I wanted to share this video with you. Can you hear the sound? Can you hold on? Can you hear the sound?
No, we don't get the sound.
No, I think we messed up with the video sound. It's just a 1 minute video, but the full video is on the YouTube, and then I think the full video is about 9 minutes. You can both watch the teaser and the full video. So I'm gonna skip this video since you cannot hear the sound. But it's interesting educational video and fun video. So I hope that you can watch it later. Let me see. So, just for fun, I want to show some more examples of hat boxes that I found in a museum around the world. For over years, many of the hats were themselves went missing. So these boxes were treated as a mystery objects. No one was quite sure what they were for, but every now and then, curators stumble upon clues, a record, a photograph, a matching piece that finally reveal their true purpose. And when you look closely, the box themselves are works of art and beautifully crafted and often lacquered or decorated with delicate paper pattern. And soon, Western hat became powerful symbols of modernity. Here you can see Western hat paper bag featuring a graphic of modern man wearing stylish hat, and hat advertisement for different types of a Western hat, showing just how fashionable and important they became in presenting this new era of change and progress. Here are more examples of hats imported from Japan and England, and they perfectly capture the look and the attitude of the time. And they show how hats quickly become key symbol of both modernity and social status. Hat culture, and you can really see how Korea, once vibrant hat culture, was gradually being replaced by Western style. And by 1910, Western had become a symbol of progress and owning a one and just being modern. So far we talked a lot about the men's hats, and you will wonder, what about women, right? But unfortunately, hats were much less common in women's fashion. During the Joseon dynasty, women strict social rules, and most had no public occupations, and they were expected to stay indoors. So when they did go out, they often covered their faces with a long outer jacket called 장옷, and then women's headwear therefore wasn't about showing power or status in public. It was more about making life stages and adapting to the weather or celebrating special occasions. So I'm going to share some examples. So here's a baby hat called 굴레. It was embroidered with a bright silk thread, and it was a mother's wishes for her child's long, happy life. And there are elegant tiara, one for the weddings. And this is a fur line, the winter caps used during the cold months. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. The hat culture has, largely disappeared both in Korea and in the West. And as we no longer rely on hats for protections from the weather or as a marker of the social status, but that doesn't mean that hat itself it disappeared. If we fast forward to the present, hat returns, not in palaces, but on Netflix. When Kingdom premiered, the global audiences are kept asking, what are those incredible Korean hats? And then came the K-pop Demon Hunters. The Saja boys wear that tall black hats, and what this shows us is simple. Tradition doesn't stay in a museum. It evolves. It lives on the screen, in the music, and in our imagination. So our past isn't gone. It's simply wearing a new hat. So next time you need to show off something Korean, wear Korean hats of any kind. This is a two images, two performances that I hosted, and they're wearing incredibly amazing Korean hats. So I hope that you can show off your Koreanness in a special occasion with a specially made hats like this. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing my video and I'm going to welcome any questions.
Thank you, Director Jin. That was really engaging and exciting. I really enjoyed hearing your talk right now. And one thing that I just wondered is I know there was the hat that covers the hair, and there was a lot of talk about the hair. Um, and I don't actually have a lot of experience on that. So what exactly about the hair was it that linked them to their family, or why was that so precious and so heartbreaking for them to cut? I'm assuming is they don't cut it, right? The idea is
For
not.
entire their life, they never cut their hair. It's just a long braided hair or tied up on the top of it. So in order to keep it neat, and they're wearing the sangtu and then another layer of headgears. So cutting their hair means they're cutting parts of their body. So they got inserted, I guess.
Mm.
And then for a Western perspective, long hair without, taking care of, I don't think that they wash the hair on a regular basis, to be honest. So they saw it as a backward or barbaric. So the government wanted to, modernize by dress code and hair code.
Thank you. I've got a question here in the chat for you. It says, do you see the cut evolving into modern high fashion, or do you believe it should be preserved strictly in its traditional form to maintain its historical integrity?
I think that traditional hats are been maintained by, I mean, you saw, I think at least five or six different artisans. They all specialize in certain part. I think a traditional has been reserved in an original way, but because of the popularity, from the K-pop music or drama, I think that some of hat made of artificial plastic materials are on sale on Amazon. And through the K-pop Demon Hunters, I think the last few years I saw the surge of the Halloween costume. They don't look like a, especially Korean tall hat, black tall hat. But I think are made out of fabric, and then some of them are just witches' tall hat. But people wanted to, you know, copy the K-pop Demon Hunters Saja Boys. So I think either way, I think it's a good way of expressing or spreading the Korean culture. Um, I mentioned in the beginning that I wanted to make a distinctly Korean style Korean exhibition. I wanted to make it different from Chinese or Japanese exhibition. But come to think of it, both China and Japan has something very uniquely Chinese or Japanese, especially Japanese culture. They kind of popularize their cultural icons, Japanese tea. I mean, tea is not originally from Japan either, but they kind of commodified and then made a Japanese tea culture so unique. So I think it's our time to make the hat to be something popular, something uniquely Korean through the pop culture or refined exhibition.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I did think that was really interesting how you mentioned that a lot of other things you see in the museums, you
Hmm.
can kind of cross relate,
Right.
but the
Hmm.
Korean hat was distinct. And
Hmm.
that's a really, we have another comment or question. Thank you for such an entertaining and educational talk. You showed us segments of the meticulous and time-consuming process of making the cat hat. Are cots still being made in Korea by artisans in the same manner,
Hmm.
or is there a more modern way that these are being made?
So both those artisans are supported by government stipend. So they try to preserve that, same set of the skill. So those, specially made, cod hats are preserved by those skilled artisan. But because of the popularity of the TV and music, cheaply made same shape of a Korean hats are being circulated on the market as well. So if you want to buy, you can buy it on the market. Last slide that I showed, it was a musician, but they made that their hats in red and yellow. It's kind of modernized version of traditional hats. I don't think Korea had a yellow hat or red hats like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question. What was the occasion for the hat party that you had?
It was the opening reception of a hat show. So we had a set of traditional Korean hats for audience to try them on. But I encouraged them to show up with their favorite hats. So it wasn't, fancy hats. Some of them were a party hat, but some of them just, show up with their baseball caps or military hats. But it was a hat party, so it was fun. Yeah.
Is that exhibit still at the Charles Wang
No, it
Center?
was back in 2019. Yeah.
Oh, too
But I
bad.
think we can throw out the same type of hats in Boston if you guys want. And having a hat party, it might be fun. Or without the exhibition, I mean, we celebrate Lunar New Year, but Lunar New Year sometimes as a, person who's creating a public program, people kept calling Chinese New Year, so I corrected it. It's a Lunar New Year. But when you wanted to have, performer, it's so hard to explain what's Chinese, what's Korean. So there is a Lunar New Year. Japanese people celebrate Cherry Blossom Festival. So I think that we should have a hat party. I mean, it could be a spring, or it could be during the holiday season, or it could be during the Halloween season. But we could call it as a hat party and showcases Korean kind of culture celebration.
I love it. That would be
Mhm.
awesome. That would be great. Any other questions? We do have another one that just came up. If we want to learn more about the historical and cultural aspect of the Korean hats, can you recommend us some resources where we can learn more about them?
First watch those two. I mean, first watch that teacher and then video. You will see the whole history of trend, and people get hair cut, and then they didn't know what to do with their really barbaric short hair, and then they start wearing the Western hats, and then we saw the hybrid version of it. I was really fascinated, finding the hat, shape of Western style, but made out of the horsehair. It was amazing artifact. And then there are three or four existing in Berlin and in the Washington, D.C., and then Salem, Massachusetts. So first watch the video, and then I don't think there's a many article written in English. But there are many hat show in the past in Korea as well. So in Korea, there's an exhibition catalog available, but it might be hard to find in the state.
Another question came up. Did all children get the decorated hats, or was it only for children of noble birth or a certain status?
I would say certain status. Some of them had a hat with embroidery, but the plain ones, it's just a black color. But the commoners kid, they only had a braided hair without a hat. But isn't that amazing that all age, all occupation, I mean, there's so many different kind of hats, and then I think that's such a unique aspect of Korean culture.
Hmm. When you were talking about the horsehair hat and the meticulous way that they made it, I just wondered how many hats would a man own? is it so even back then, was it very
Mhm.
just like a precious item that they would maybe maintain one? Just the process of it looks like it's so demanding to
I
create
would say
even.
that there are many artisans who specialize in, and then one man had a multiple hats, indoor, outdoor, special occasion. So I think at least they own five to 10 different kind of hats. And I didn't have a slide tonight, but there is a contemporary artist who's making a very serene vassal shape of sculpture made out of horsehair. So she's literally weaving the shape of vassal. I forgot her name, Jinyoung something, but she won the award from Loewe Foundation. They promote the craft artists all over the world. But she's not making a hat, but she's using the same horsehair material, weaving through little by little and then making really amazing large scale sculptures. So maybe you can look it up, horsehair sculptor, then she will pop up. Mm. So this
Amazing.
skill revised and then experimented by contemporary artists, and then they're making a different shape, but showing the same kind of sensibility of a horsehair hat.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question here. Um, how were hat cultures in China and Japan as opposed to that in Korea? How are they different?
So I briefly mentioned that China, I mean, all of the country had a hat culture, but not as much as Korea. Chinese hats are not so many. I mean, in order to show, I mean, in order to indicate their different status, social classes, they had a different color of clothes. And then for the officials, so they had a ranking badge. So hat wasn't the sole indicator of their social, classes, gender, and occupation. And Japan also had a hat, but it was more used for the ceremonies. So it's not exclusively devoted for that many variety. Like Korea. So hat is really a unique culture of Korea. So I mentioned in the beginning, all the arrivals, all the visitors comments on Korean hats. Those are the people who only visited Korea. They travel all of the places, including China and Japan. But instantly when they arrived Korea, they noticed a very different hat culture. Everyone was wearing the hats.
Hmm. It's very
But
interesting.
isn't that so sad that those cultures have been kind of vanished and disappear? Yeah. I mean, in both in Korea and in all of the places. Yeah. So now, who's wearing hats? Whoever had a bad hair day, right?
That's right. Oh, thank you, Director Jin. It was a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
It's just fascinating to see how important this.
So, as a new vice president, you should
Yeah,
throw a hat party.
yeah.
Maybe year-end party should be a hat party, any kind of hat.
I'll have to keep that on my top five list to do. Um, I just think it's wonderful. I love the way Korea was able to even there's like this fusion, the merger of retaining their own identity, even as they were receiving new
Mhm.
influences and
Mhm.
using their own materials and continuing their own way of
Mhm.
presenting and incorporating the newness. So I think it's
So
very,
come to
very
think of it, horsehair is used for the instrument in overseas,
yes,
right?
right,
But then no one was thinking of making a hat, right?
yeah,
Or
on the
brushes
boat.
or the instrument strings. But yeah,
Koreans found a way.
right.
So yes, thank you again tonight for joining us, Director Jin. That was really just fun and engaging, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for their curiosity and their commitment to learning about Korean culture. We hope that these past 4 weeks have been informative and engaging, and we hope that you've gained a little bit of a deeper appreciation for some of it. And we welcome you to learn more if you want to join us for future activities at kcsboston.org. You can learn about future events, and we really hope that you will continue on this journey with us and learn more about the culture. We welcome you to join us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Director Jin.